Welcome to another edition of Trunk and Tales as we navigate what is happening in the world of politics. You would be hard-pressed to find another presidential election year, especially the summer months, as we've had so far this year. The Democrats have now changed who's going to be their presidential nominee. The Democrats now will have to decide who's going to be their vice presidential nominee. Also on tap, all of the House and a third of the Senate is up for election. And will there be changes made to the United States Supreme Court? And with me to talk about all of this is my panel of political experts and analysts, and they are the former Republican governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett. Mr. Corbett also served as the state attorney general and as the U.S. attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Mr. Corbett teaches law right now. Also joining us is Keith Schmidt. Keith's background is varied in the Republican side of the party. He was the state director for former Republican Senator Rick Santorum. He also consulted Santorum on his 2012 presidential bid. Keith has his own consulting firm. Also joining us is Joe Mystic. Joe has consulted Democrats across the state on different elections. He also served in city government as deputy mayor. Joe right now teaches law at Duquesne University, and you can read his thoughts on life and politics every weekend in the Tribune Review. Normally joining us is Jim Byrne, the former state Democratic Party chairman. Jim couldn't be with us today. He'll be with us for our next session. So, Joe, you're going to have to defend yourself by yourself against these two Republicans. You think you can do it?
I'm unmatched by just one of these guys. I mean, now they're going to hang up on me.
I've seen you work. I think you can handle it on your own. So let's start with the decision, although not official yet, to name Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic presidential nominee. Keith, the last time we met, you were begging for the Democrats to have Harris lead the ticket. Since that time, she has gained in the polls, and by most accounts, she is in a dead heat with former Republican President Donald Trump in the swing states. So my question, do you still want her to be the Democratic presidential nominee?
100%. 100%. I mean, it's clear that with the outlook among Democrats, with the current president and the fate that they were facing in November, the vice president breathed new life into the hierarchy of the party. There's no question about that. She has a significant bounce coming out of this announcement. They thought there was no chance, and now they see a glimmer of hope, and they're organizing accordingly. There's a honeymoon period. I understand all this, but listen, I still want the current vice president of the United States to be the nominee, largely because when I think of all the other possibilities, I think there are a lot of strong governors, senators, former cabinet members. There's the bench on the Democrats isn't that weak. It's just that they felt compelled to stick with Kamala Harris. I know that part of it is the financial side of it, and part of it is switching up from a ticket that they were prepared to run in November. But sticking with Kamala is a double-edged sword, because now she has to wear all the concerns the American people have on this administration, both domestically and internationally. And time is actually our friend right now. I mean, I think we have over 3 months. It sounds like it's quick, but for 3 months, there's going to be a hyper focus, gentlemen, on this race, obviously, as if there hasn't been already. But there'll be a hyper focus. And I think when you peel away the onion on Kamala Harris, because although she's been vice president for over 3.5 years, a lot of people don't know her. And they're going to get to know her. And we're going to talk about her record in California and in the United States Senate and as vice president. And I don't know that she's going to fare well under that examination. I mean, we all know we have liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, but California liberal plays hard in the Midwest, plays hard in the South. And she can't run from the mantra of California liberal. If there ever lived a California liberal and with somebody with a progressive agenda and an extreme agenda, certainly far to the left of the current president, it's the sitting vice president of the United States. So absolutely, it's a bounce. Absolutely looks competitive. But I would suggest in the weeks and months ahead, you're going to see as she gets defined more closely by the American people, I think Trump will have a comfortable win in November.
All right. That was a long dialogue right there as to why you still want her to be the presidential nominee for the Democrats. Joe, I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Yeah, these guys are so confused. I mean, they can't figure out how to handle this new candidacy. Either she's too tough on crime, she was too tough of a prosecutor, or she's too much of a progressive, too much of a liberal. She's too soft on. They can't figure it out. And the truth is, she struck a balance. She was tough on certain crimes and maybe not so tough on other crimes. And that seems to be where America's headed these days. So, I agree with Keith. She, to this extent, she wasn't my first pick, but at the end of the day, she's the only pick. And what she has going for her more than anything is she's not Trump. And that's what's going to carry her into the White House.
All right, Governor, your thoughts.
Well, this was inevitable for no other reason, and Keith just lately talked about it, is the money that had been raised during that period of time beforehand had to go to somebody whose name was either Biden or Harris in an election. And it was over $200 million. So this was going to happen no matter what. I think the Democrats made the right decision, convincing the president not to continue his run and to turn it over to Kamala Harris. But she still is somewhat of, as Keith said, an unknown quantity as to how she would govern if she would get into that position. So it makes the next 90 plus days a very interesting period of time. And you're going to see, if you're sick of commercials now, just wait a week. You're going to really be sick of them.
Do you think we're going to hear much at all about policies from either one of the candidates in the upcoming fall campaign?
I don't think so. I think with the commercials, it's the attack the entire time. I think it would be very difficult for people to hear exactly what they want to do other than broad generalizations. As the President, as President Biden is saying right now, he has some broad ideas, including constitutional amendments. Constitutional amendments are very hard to get, so we'll see where that one goes.
Joe, you think it's going to be on issues or just negative campaign?
Well, I think both sides will have their representatives. It may not be the top of the ticket, but certain people pushing policy matters to the forefront as much as they can. As the governor said, you're going to have a hard time breaking through with that. I mean, this is going to be a hotly contested race, and the airwaves will be flooded with either attack ads or these introductory ads trying to define yourself before the other side defines you. So it's going to be tough, but it's a fascinating campaign. It's the English style of an election campaign. They have I think it's a 90-day cap. And they do it all in that short time period. They save a fortune. Consultants aren't real happy with that, but they get it all done in a very, very compact, compressed period of time. We're sort of looking at that a little bit. It's kind of interesting. I'm fascinated just to watch it.
I can't run from who Donald Trump is. I mean, he's bombastic. It's the theater of the absurd at times. But I can also tell you that I'm not sure we're going to find out a lot more stuff in the next 3 months. I mean, we've been examining him in a hyper way for almost a decade. I mean, so who Trump is, the American people understand it. They either like it or are disgusted by it, or somewhere in the middle. But the challenge for Kamala Harris is she is going to get defined in the next few months. We are still, believe it or not, we're getting to know her. And I'm not sure that examination is going to be very favorable to her. I really think as the American people are educated on what her policies likely would be, and that she is to the as I said earlier, to the left of the current president, and her position on energy, and her position obviously on the border, and her lack of experience on foreign affairs. I don't know. I have a feeling the more you know, the better Donald Trump's going to look to the American voter.
Let me add, there are two things with the remaining period of time, the 90 plus days, that the campaigns have to identify. And that is, who are their voters? They pretty much have a good idea. And they have to come up with a good voter turnout process, not only for November, but for October, when the early voting takes place. It's completely different this year than it's ever been in even more so than 4 years ago. But then number two is to identify who's the swing vote, who's in the middle that is sitting there today. Here we are, the 31st of July, and say, I don't know which one I'm going to vote for. I really think probably right now the polling would be, I'm not voting for either one. And what are you going to give me in the meantime? So I think those are the issues that people will be talking about in the next week or two.
I think there's another dimension here, and we don't know who she's going to pick yet, but we will know in the next few days for vice president. This J.D. Vance, I mean, he's a bust. I mean, it's a bad pick. And I think if they were still running against Joe Biden, it might have been worth a gamble. But, now we got Trump, who's actually too old to be president. He's the old guy in the race now. You look to his vice presidential candidate because you figure he might not finish out his term. We heard that about Biden and Harris before the president decided not to run again. And you realize it's J.D. Vance with some of the crackpot ideas he's espoused over the years and his lack of commitment to any values or principles or beliefs. He does a 180 degree on everything he's ever believed in. So he believes in everything or he believes in nothing. I'm not sure which it is. But I think usually a vice president is not much of a factor. I think if you anticipate that the vice president, if Trump were to get elected, will eventually accede to the presidency because Trump's old and out of shape, it's a scary thing. I think Vance will make a difference and not a good one for the Republicans.
We were going to take a break. You've already gotten us into the vice presidential thing, so let's continue with that. And that is, Joe, I'll have to ask you, who do you think she'll select as the vice president? I'm guessing that her vice presidential candidate. I'm guessing you might like Josh Shapiro. Just a guess.
Yeah, well, look, I love Josh Shapiro. I think he's doing a fine job. He's a great standard bearer for the Democratic Party and its beliefs. Is at least those beliefs that we can all agree on. It's not necessarily an organized political party, but when we do arrive at a consensus, he espouses that and he carries the flag and raises the banner and does a great job. I think he'd be a great vice presidential candidate, but it might not be him. The question is, can you get Pennsylvania in the hopper with Josh Shapiro campaigning hard for you, even though he may not be the vice presidential candidate? But I think he'd be a fine choice.
I think Josh is going to campaign hard no matter what. And I believe Josh, if he has a game plan that he's built out over the course of his career, was not looking to be running in this 24 year, but possibly in 28 for the presidential position. So, and if you watch his style on TV as compared to his press conferences and stuff, the conference they had, I think 2 days ago or yesterday in Montgomery County, you saw some fire and brimstone coming from him to rile up that.
It actually surprised me a little, Governor.
Yes.
Where did that come from, right?
Well, maybe it's an audition.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Joe, or before I go back to you, Keith, you have anything to say about Josh Shapiro or who the Democrats shouldn't?
I mean, Josh Shapiro is an accomplished governor thus far, I have to say, and has got some good press. I ultimately think he has an ambition to serve in the as president or vice president. Probably more likely he'd want to be president. Time is on his side. He doesn't need this right now. I don't know that vice presidencies or running for vice president ever affects someone's career like running for president does. If you lose running for president, you're usually dismissed. If vice presidents aren't generally blamed for a ticket's fate, so it would be hard to turn down. But I think I said this on a previous podcast. In our entire lives, the Middle East has always been hot, and it probably will be for the balance of our lives. But right now, it's on fire. So it is somewhat problematic. I mean, as a Jewish American and someone who is 150% in support of Israel, and as far as I'm concerned, rightly so, that's somewhat of a divisive position within even the Democratic Party, which has largely divided over this issue. And we see that playing out in cities and in universities and protests around the country. That's not everyone is aligned on this issue. So highlighting that issue with a Jewish American as on your ticket for vice president, I'm not sure. That could be problematic. And that could be the reason, as Gov said, as the former governor said, he's going to be of value to this ticket no matter what, because he's an ardent campaigner and he'll work because it will be a feather in his cap to deliver Pennsylvania. So I'm not sure he'd work any harder if he wasn't on a ticket. So I'm saying the odds are he probably will be passed by, although right now he is the number one pick. I'm looking at that North Carolina governor as a maybe somewhat of a dark horse, but
He withdrew.
I'm thinking that's where this decision might go.
Roy Cooper, I saw in the news today, he's withdrawn his being considered for that position. He doesn't want to do it. And I think the reason he doesn't want to do it is the lieutenant governor there is a Republican. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Joe, the other issue that with Shapiro, there could be two. The current vice president has not been that much in favor of fracking. That doesn't help for Pennsylvania. And then the other issue, of course, is that Shapiro was, and his original budget message, I believe, had support for publicly funded private school vouchers. And already national education advocacy groups have written letters to Kamala Harris saying, we don't want Josh Shapiro.
It's funny that, Governor Corbett wrestled with both those issues some years ago. And he can tell you that, those are both thorny topics for any governor. He met fracking head on and used it as an economic development tool. And I think that's where Pennsylvania was. But then, of course, Governor, you also found yourself on the wrong side of the PSEA. And, you had to fight that battle. So I guess what I'm saying is, whoever you pick, they're going to have some issues if they've governed. When you govern, you make hard decisions. And sometimes it breaks your way and sometimes it breaks. But, you just look for a balance. You don't expect someone to have served in a position like Governor Corbett has or Governor Shapiro is now serving in and not break some eggs. You got to break some eggs to make the omelet, and that's what they do.
And I'll jump in on that. You have to make the tough decisions, and you can't try and please everybody all the time. It's impossible. And if I have any true criticism of Josh Shapiro at the moment, he seems to be trying to do that. And it's really hard. With PSEA, keep in mind that in my 3 races before my final race, they endorsed me. I had been a teacher before I went to law school. I was a member of PSEA for 1 year. But when it came down to this, and I was looking at how we can change the system, they were totally opposed to me. They were also opposed to me because of the first budget that I inherited from the process that was left behind by Governor Rendell. But you can't please everybody all the time. And I would urge Josh to keep that in mind. And that's why I think personally, this is how do you predict politics? Can he wait until 2028? Will he have an opportunity? If Kamala wins, you would assume that she'd be there to run for re-election in 2028. Those windows of opportunity, they open and close very, very quickly, or almost like a revolving door. They come around and you jump in on one of them. You hope you got the right one. You just never know.
I'd like one of you, either Governor or Keith, to respond to Joe's comments about the Republican vice presidential selection, that he doesn't think it's a very good one. Then
I'll add this. With former President Trump, you never know what he's going to say. And I suspect his staff rarely knows what he's going to say. Those little bombs or mines that are ahead in this campaign could affect it one way or the other. The selection of J.D. Vance was a surprise, I think, to many people. I don't know why he did it. Maybe he's looking for somebody who is bombastic like he is. But I don't think he helped himself in that. I think there were a number of other people he could have helped himself. He didn't need J.D. Vance to win Ohio. He won Ohio last time. He probably had a better chance to win Ohio this time. So if you look at Mr. Trump and say, why do you do it? I don't think he's got an answer. He just did it.
Okay. Keith, any comments on the vice presidential candidate?
The only thing I can say is that the president believes he's going to win this on his own, and he cares more. And for all the people that thinks he cares about power, I actually am starting to think he cares about legacy. And I actually believe that he's willing to put a J.D. Vance in place because he doesn't want this to be the Trump era, where the Trump era hijacked the Republican Party. I think this is his shot across the bow to try to permanently change the direction and philosophy of the Republican Party, even after he's gone. So for some reason, I'm thinking this is more long-term and legacy than wondering whether this particular individual will strengthen his candidacy or not. So he's looking beyond. Maybe he's a little overconfident, but I think that's the reason that he picked J.D. Vance.
Of course, we have to remember he selected J.D. Vance before President Biden chose to withdraw from the race.
Yeah,
Yes.
one last comment on J.D. Vance. I just want to say that because of him, we've decided to get a cat.
All right. We have to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Trunk and Tails as we take a look at the political scene. It's not just the presidential race this fall. All members of the House and about a third of the Senate is up for re-election or election for the first time. So, Governor, we know you have been active in the campaign of Dave McCormick to unseat incumbent Democratic Senator in Pennsylvania, Bob Casey. Right now, the polls do not favor McCormick that much. Your comments?
Well, that's not a surprise. You have a 18-year incumbent in the Senate, a person who spent his entire life, along with his dad, in politics, who has the name ID out there. If it was a toss-up right now today, I would be surprised. I think McCormick's campaign is doing a good job. They're getting out there. They're talking to people. We see the negatives of both sides being thrown out there. If I could counsel Mr. McCormick on one thing, and I think he's doing, he's pressing the flesh like he needs to all across the state. And he needs to start talking a little bit about the positive. What are some of the goals he'd like to see accomplished if he's a member of the United States Senate? That's probably going to fall on deaf ears in his campaign staff, because unfortunately in campaigns today, Keith, you correct me if I'm wrong, it's 90% negative and maybe 10% positive.
Joseph.
Joe, you jumping in, or you want me to jump in?
Well, I'll just reiterate what I said before. I counted it before, and I think it's 56 years. For 56 years, there's been a Casey, a Robert Casey on the ballot in Pennsylvania. And talk about a brand name, in Pennsylvania politics. So McCormick has to overcome that. That's a hard thing to overcome. He may not instill the kind of fervor and excitement that we're seeing right now in the presidential race, but it's hard to say something bad about him, and I think that's what they're struggling with. They're trying to pin some things on him that are really more national woes than like things that are caused by one particular senator. Who do you blame inflation on? That's a big question. Maybe whoever's handy or whoever you want to blame at the time. So I think it's a tough race. McCormick's in a tough spot. He's, unfortunately for him, been defined from his previous races. And a lot of stuff that's come out there has seemed to have stuck, and it's being reinforced in this campaign. So, I look for it to tighten and eventually be a fairly close race. But, I think right now it's still Casey's to lose.
One of the things
6 years of Casey's cut both ways. I mean, I know the name idea is universal. I think, as he said, it's not been a controversial name in any way, shape, or form. You might say they haven't done enough, or it's or I'd like to see more activity, but you're not going to hear a lot of negatives there. You're not going to hear that he stepped into a controversy, because the senior senator from Pennsylvania has avoided controversy at all with all efforts, and successfully, quite frankly. But as I've said before many times, the senator also was graced with three very good cycles: 06, 12, and 18 were all Democratic waves. This one's a little different, so he has to pay a lot more attention to this one. I would suggest it's going to be probably a 2-point race at the end, and Casey doesn't need Kamala Harris to win. He could probably still win if Trump won. But on the inverse, McCormick needs Trump to win Pennsylvania. If Trump wins Pennsylvania, this race is naturally going to tighten, and there's a chance he could pull off a close victory.
I think you're onto something there, Keith, because if you take a look at the polling, June into July, especially after the debate, McCormick came up just as Trump did. He gained some ground. And then when Harris was announced as the presidential candidate for the Democrats, and she started to surge in the polls, McCormick's went down a little bit, and Casey went back up again. So I think you're absolutely right. So up until this point, so many of the Senate races were being decided almost on their own. It didn't matter who the presidential candidate was. Now it's at least in Pennsylvania.
Let me just jump in here, because when you say, and you're also reinforcing what I said, and I appreciate that, but it's interesting about the surge thing too. Now, I'm just thinking this out loud. Part of the surge, and we'll find out if it's different in the next week, two, maybe the next month. But was the surge that Biden's out, or was the surge that Kamala's in?
both.
I would suggest maybe it's more that Biden's out. And we're going to find out, because they don't have yet a hard opinion of Kamala, but they were excited that he's out because they knew they were going to lose. So that bump was more created by him leaving the race. The question is, can she own it on her own? And that's the one that I think creates opportunity for the former president.
Joe?
Well, I think it's a good issue. I think it's a good question. I hadn't thought of it either that way, but we'll find out. It's good analysis.
Yep, time will tell.
Well, and let me add this: during the first 4 years of the Trump campaign in 2016 and going into that, and if you look at the registration, we lost a lot of Republican women, particularly in the Southeast, because of his positions on things. Some of them started coming back. However, I think with Kamala leading the ticket, we may see a lot of the moderate Republican women who may have changed their registration to Democrat or Independent, going with Kamala, certainly not with Trump. I think that's an issue. Going back to Casey for a minute, I observe this, and I know Bob Casey pretty well. We talk, we're friendly with each other, even though we're different sides of the aisle. He's been in the Senate for 18 years, and he's still not in leadership, as far as I know. That's a long time to have somebody from Pennsylvania there, 18 years, and not be in a significant role in leadership. Now, does that transfer to a political ad against him? No. But when I look at it, Bob, you've been there a long time. You were the Auditor General for a long time. We need a leader in Pennsylvania down there. Frankly, I can't believe I'm about to say this. Our junior senator has probably established himself more as a leader in the Senate at this point in time.
Very interesting comment. We need to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment. We do have, welcome back to Trunk and Tales, by the way, but we do have two law professors on this panel, Governor Corbett and Joe Mistick. Keith does not teach law, but he does have opinions, as you know, and that is what I'm going to seek right now. Yeah. Gentlemen, your thoughts on President Biden calling for a constitutional amendment regarding presidential immunity and for major changes in just how the Supreme Court operates. Keith, you get the first crack.
Two lawyers and I get the first crack. Okay. I'll
I
be
did it
short and
that way.
sweet.
I did it that way so you didn't have to try to to defend something legally. So
All right, good. Well, I'll make it short and sweet. It's hard for you folks to believe I can be short and sweet, but listen. I get that it's important to the president, but to me, it's window dressing at best. It's a political maneuver. The timing's good because there's some frustration among rank and file average Americans on some of the what's been happening at the High Court of late. I know there's some consternation and whatnot, but folks, it takes 2/3 of both houses and 3/4 of state legislatures, which means it would have to be passed in 38 states. That dog don't hunt. It's not going to happen. It's not a waste of time because a debate is always healthy to have a debate. But for any sense that there's going to be a constitutional amendment changing the makeup or terms of the Supreme Court is folly.
Joe,
all right, gentlemen.
go ahead.
Well,
You
you
go.
may not need a constitutional amendment. So, there is another possibility out there. But just let me say this. I remember a time when there were billboards and bumper stickers in where I grew up that said, impeach Justice Douglas or impeach Justice Warren. I mean, that's been a big thing. The John Birch Society wanted to get rid of Justice Warren for Justice Douglas, both, I think, for years. And they had a minor advertising campaign at the time. And of course, it didn't go anywhere. But we've been talking for a long time about reforming the Supreme Court of the United States. To really retire these folks at a certain age would require a constitutional amendment. There is another proposal that's been bandied about over the years, and that is this: if a careful reading of the Constitution says that they're appointed to the court for life, but the court's not just the Supreme Court. If you could remove them from the Supreme Court, terminate their service there after an age certain, and then have them continue to serve in a circuit court, another federal judicial seat. There's an argument that would be legit, that could work. No, we will never know, unless it happens and it gets challenged. And the odd thing is, eventually the Supreme Court will have to decide if that's legal. So good luck with that. Usually, right? But there are a lot of positives. And we're always talking about changing. We should change the way the court's appointed and their years of service. We just convinced Joe Biden that he was too old to run for re-election as president. These guys put years on Joe Biden, and they stay on the court making the most important decisions in American society.
But this is not new. They've been doing this for a long time, Jim, right?
No. We'll continue to talk about this. I think Keith's right. This is the eternal debate.
It is something to debate about at the bar, at the dinner table, and everything. In reality, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Franklin Roosevelt tried to pack the court. That didn't happen because the rules are there. This was and continues to be a total political statement. This is what I want to do. He doesn't have enough time left in his term in office to do it, let alone in Kamala's term of office to do it. So let's accept it for what it is. It's a political statement. Let's move on. It's like almost like, don't look at what's going on here. Look over here. I don't want you to look over here. And to me, it gets frustrating. Joe and I, we will sit in his office along with a couple of our law students and stuff and discuss this, and we have a lot of fun. But does it accomplish anything? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And that's what this statement does. Now, I go back to this based upon what I've seen, based upon what we do here in Pennsylvania. Our judges in Pennsylvania, after a constitutional amendment, I think it was, Joe, they had to retire at the age of 75. It was 70, right, and they got it moved to 75. Dear friend of mine, Judge Manning, kind of pushed for that because he was getting ready.
My firm ran that race,
and your firm ran that race. I would have no problem if the Constitution were amended that public servants working for the federal government, elected or appointed, would have to term out at 75. Now, is that going to make me happy or make the
As
older
long as they
people.
can continue to
I'm
teach
75
law,
now.
Governor.
Let's keep that in mind. Joe and I are both 75.
Right.
We realize what goes on and how you start to slow down a little bit. We need active, keen minds in those positions making decisions. Would I like to run for office again? No. Could I? I think I could right now. But what am I going to do tomorrow morning? If you wake up, you have a stroke and everything. We need to make that kind of decision. It's not going to happen. It's a political statement. Actually, I think it's a factual statement.
When FDR proposed to expand the court, it's because conservative, ultra-conservative justices were not giving their approval to his progressive programs that he enacted to get us out of the Depression. So he did propose to expand the court. Now, people look at that as a failed public gambit. But in truth, after he did that, the conservative justices began to vote his way. So in the face of that threat, he moved them towards the center and maybe even a little left of center in some of these cases. So, yeah, is it political? Yeah, it is, but sometimes it helps, sometimes it helps.
Right.
So, Joe, you're
Can't hurt
saying
to
he was
debate.
playing political poker.
Pardon me?
Yeah, maybe.
The president was playing political poker.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, in that hand he won.
Yeah.
We have to wrap this up, and as I wrap it up, I'll throw this out for you. In the 2023-24 term, the United States Supreme Court agreed to look at 62 cases, of which they ruled on 60 because they dismissed 2 of those cases. And 25 or 41% of those 60 cases they handled were unanimous decisions. 22 or 36% were 6-3 split decisions. And of those 22 split decisions, a liberal justice was the author of the opinion. So, it was a liberal, I believe it was 9 or 10 of those split decisions were coming from the liberal side. And 5 or 8% were decisions of 5-4, which meant that somebody from either side crossed the political aisle and just chose to go with the other justices. My point being that I think that you're right. This is all politics, and the court seems to go on whether liberals have been in charge as they were for, what was it, from Earl Warren to
Reagan.
To who?
I think Reagan helped start.
To Rehnquist.
Well, yeah, up to Rehnquist. That's it. Yeah,
up to Rehnquist.
Right. So, it was
Burger Court was pretty liberal.
17, 18 years, whatever it was. So it swings back and forth. It goes back to, again, I'll say, as the 44th president said, elections do have consequences, and that one of those is to whom is appointed to the United States Supreme Court. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us on Trunk and Tales. We're going to do this again, and we look forward to our next edition. I want to thank all of you for joining us for Trunk and Tales. And if you like this program, please subscribe or hit the like button and all those kinds of things you have to do. It'll help keep this program going. Thanks again. We'll see you the next time.
Thank you.